very big thank you to you for coming at the earlier time. It was due to the fact that we may have had a briefing this evening, and I wanted to make sure you were all able to be at corporate. Unfortunately, there's no briefing, but you could be home early tonight. Thank you. 5 o'clock is informal questions. There is nobody in the public gallery to ask a question. Therefore, I'm going to start the committee meeting immediately. Minutes. Fiona? Oh, dear.
Are you happy to sign those at the end of the meeting?
Yes, I am at the end of the meeting. Is everybody happy with that? Thank you very much indeed. Apologies for absence and substitutions.
Thank you, Chairman. I've had apologies from Councillors Peter Martin and Wyatt Ramsdale, and Councillors Maurice Byam and Jim Edwards are attending as substitutes.
Thank you, welcome. Declarations of interest?
None received, Chairman.
Thank you. Questions by members of the public?
None received.
Thank you. Committee work programme. I'm assuming that you have all read your papers, and therefore I have asked the officers not to go into reports page by page. Responsive repairs in-depth review, final report. I'd like to say a very big thank you to Fiona on my right, who was instrumental in putting this report together and has done really a very good job. We all know this report well, because we have been through it several times. So unless you've got some burning issue with it, I will move straight to the recommendation. I have to tell you that I have written to the Chief Executive of Mears, thanking Mears personnel for their participation in this piece of work, but pointing out they are already getting behind yet again with the invoices, and I hope he would intervene to rectify this. So I have sent that letter on your behalf to Mears because we don't want a repetition of last year. Yes, Councillor.
May I reiterate your point? It is a very good report, and thank you very much.
It's a fine piece of work, actually, and assuming we all get re-elected, there's a subject that we might look at next year, and assuming I'm chairman of this committee if I get elected. So, anybody else want to ask any questions? Then can I put the recommendation, which is on page unnumbered? It's the first page. Okay, is that agreed? Thank you very much indeed. That's fine. And a big thank you to all the officers involved in that report. Item 6, Waden Lane former landfill site, special interest group. There is going to be two aspects to this today, and that is that I do not believe at this stage, because we are about to embark on an election, it would be appropriate to set the names of the special interest group, because they may change. And I do have the portfolio holder here. Councillor O'Neill, do you wish to say anything before I go into the report?
I think it's most appropriate to endorse what you've just said. In view of the timing, I think it is better to wait until after the election, handle it then, decide the composition at that time, and depending on who we've got available for the purpose. And I think the major point I'd like to put to the committee today is to make the recommendation of the terms of reference and any comments we would receive on that, and we will then finalise those TORs immediately after any comments may be received today. Thank you.
Councillor, thank you very much indeed for sending this back to us, because as you know we were very keen to get the best out of this asset, not only for the people but also for this council. So we will be looking at that, and we will be working with you on this one. So we're going to put on the back burner the composition of that committee, but we would like to determine today the terms of reference. So any comments? Mr. Munro.
Thank you, Chairman. I agree with the elections. It's not. It's better if we leave membership. I absolutely agree. I just would ask, I think it's up to Donal actually, is to make quite sure that the local community groups, who are obviously very interested in this whole subject, are sort of briefed so that they do know why there is a delay and they feel still part of the process. I know of one, the Great Austin,
John
I've
Austin.
got parking on the right. John Austin. I know of him. There may well be others I don't know of. They seem, if I may say so, to be adopting a very.
I'm sorry, everyone. That was my phone. I should have switched it off. My apologies.
There's a box at the
I always
entrance.
moan at people
And they seem, if I may say so, to be adopting a very positive and realistic, clear-sighted attitude, realising Rome can't be built in a day, and you know this site has been a mess. Well, actually, I can't say mess. I got into trouble for saying mess. It's a well-loved site now, but you know it's taken 40 years or so to get to this stage, and you know if we take a few more years, frankly, and get it right, I think we'll be the gainers for it.
Councillor Monroe, I would take it upon myself when I get home to send an email to John Austin to explain why the delay, but it isn't a delay really. I just want to make sure we get the right people. And of course, because it is a Waverley asset, then we need to make sure that the people on the working group cover Waverley as well as the local people. Mr. Gates, you indicated.
I did, and I think it's a point I raised last time when this first came up. There is a considerable shortage in Farnham of recreational facilities that are suitable to be categorised as a SANG. And I just wondered whether the terms of reference should at least hint that if this could be brought to the standard of a SANG, that might be an added benefit and would also, of course, assure it of considerable funding, because people buy SANGs in order to continue their development. But maybe you consider that's something for the SIG to do, but if it's forgotten...
Could we leave it to the SIG to do? Because I'm very keen that we give the SIG a wide approach on this particular one and not just have it confined to one particular aspect. Yes, Mr. Story.
Thank you very much. It was just to pass on some information regarding that particular point which I received from Matthew Evans, which is that he has been informed that by Natural England that it's not suitable for a SANG.
That piece of land?
Yes.
Thank you very much for that information. Anybody else? So are we happy with the terms of reference? Thank you. And we will actually leave the people on the SIG until later. Thank you. Is that recommendation agreed? Thank you. Item 7, Community Covenant.
Thank you, Madam.
Please.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. I'm sure members will be aware that we signed a community covenant back in 2012, and it's a voluntary statement of mutual support between the council and serving and former members of the armed forces. Since then, I think certainly we've had a Surrey Civilian Military Partnership Board set up, and since then the landscape they feel has dramatically changed over the last 2 years, with ex-service personnel coming back from Afghanistan, the rebasing of troops from Germany, and increasing numbers of reservists in our society. And the Military Civilian Partnership Board held a conference last November and wanted to appeal to local authorities not only to sign up, and there's been a very good sign up across the country, but also to look at key aspects of what we can do as a local authority for ex-armed services personnel. I've recently had this document through from the Royal British Legion saying what's next for military covenants, and they highlight 5 policy areas that they'd like to see us sign up to, and I'd like to confirm to members that 3 of the 5 are the ones that are in our remit, as it were, as a district council, and we meet all 3 of those, so that's really positive, which is great. And they're set out in the report here, so that's around council tax and housing benefits, housing allocation policy, and disabled adaptations. And in addition to that, we provide access to leisure cards. And interestingly, we have actually issued 53 of those to ex-service personnel, so that's, or members of the armed forces, which is excellent. But coming out of that conference, they wanted us to look at a number of other possible things that we could do to support armed service personnel, and these are in front of you here tonight for your recommendation through to executive. So one of those is to advertise all our vacancies on the Career Transition Partnership website. It doesn't cost us anything. It seems eminently sensible to do that, and indeed some of the army service personnel, you know, could be just what we're looking for in terms of some of our building services and that sort of thing. The next item is a guaranteed interview scheme. Members, I'm sure, will be aware that we already run a 2 ticks positive about disabled people scheme, which guarantees if applicants meet essential criteria of a job, they are guaranteed an interview. And they're looking at something like this for armed services personnel. We feel there's probably a little bit of detail needs to be done around this in terms of, as I say, just the detail, whether somebody has come out of the forces just recently. You know, we perhaps wouldn't consider somebody who'd left 10 years ago. So I think we need a little bit more detail around that particular one. Supporting and encouraging reservists amongst our employees. We do this already. We provide special leave entitlements for training and additional leave for training, attending camp and that sort of thing. The fourth item is whether we could exhibit at the Career Transition Partnership events. Again, just wary that what sort of resource this might mean for us. If it were one big event in the year, I think we could absolutely do that. If it was more a number of minor ones, we might sort of bulk at that. I think it might be too much of an overhead, but I'd be interested in members' views on that. And again, we could promote this amongst our contractors for them to attend these events as well, which is item 5. 6 is to establish links between Waverley's Family Support Team and the Army's Family Federation Regional Coordinators. We haven't as yet had any Army families presenting themselves for help with this team, but of course if they did, we would liaise with the necessary organisations. Promoting the corporate covenant, encouraging businesses to sign up. We can of course do that through our council links, through the Federation of Small Businesses and the Chambers of Commerce and the Business Forum. We've already joined the Heroes Welcome campaign, so that's already underway. Appointing a champion. I know Councillor Gates and Councillor Frost attended the conference and feel strongly that we should have a champion. So, and I think it will probably automatically be done through appointments in the new administration. So I think that will be the case. Last two, very easy to manage, putting clear signposts on our website to support services, and in fact I've now got the household survey from the Royal British Legion, and that will inform our delivery of services. So if there are any questions.
Thank you very much indeed. Any questions on that? Anybody? Mr. Gates.
Yes, I think this is an excellent report. I do have one or two comments. I think we could do better in the areas where we should encourage and support. In other words, it is excellent that our policies on reservists, for example, are extremely good, meet all the things, but do we actually take any action internally to encourage our staff to become reservists? There's a strong body of evidence that demonstrates that such activity improves leadership skills, etc. So my question is there anything more we could do to support and encourage, apart from having excellent policies, which when they have joined, they can take advantage of? The other matters that might come up here are slightly related. Promote the corporate covenant with councils, links with local businesses. What does that actually mean? What will we actually do? In other words, we've now got this. What's the action plan for actually doing that? We did join the Heroes Welcome. I'm afraid it hasn't worked. I think we've got to be quite honest about that. It was quite heavily promoted during Councillor Ward's mayoralty at Farnham, but it didn't get much beyond that, and I'm not aware of any Heroes Welcome activity in Waverley at the moment. So I would just say we joined the campaign, but once again, what did we actually do? And I don't think it's just saying, what do the officers do? I think it's up to members to promote this scheme. I did this in Bramley, but that's not got a lot of shops, but the big towns should be doing that more. The other aspect is I'm strongly in favour of appointing a champion. I think, because I'm on the military, well, I got demoted from the military board to a most interesting and much better thing called the Support and Remember Board. I actually went to a passing out parade, which was wonderful. But I think I'm actually regarded by the people who are doing that as the Waverley champion, but I'm not officially. And I am meeting next week with Councillor Kingsbury, leader of Woking, and a couple of officers to draft a job description, because it's one thing to say we should have a champion, it's another thing to say what are they going to do. So if you like, my last shot in this campaign will be, I hope, to have a job description that may be valuable for the Waverley champion, which I thoroughly believe should. In other words, you can have a champion, but what are they expected to do? Yes. And I think they would be expected to follow up some of these items, to see what is actually happening, see what these links on our website are. In other words, to make sure that the excellent policy level statements made here are actually implemented. Finally, I think, Madam Chairman, that the progress should be reviewed in a year by this committee, just to see what's actually happened on these items. So, really good report. I'm very pleased that the military get this level of support and interest shown within Waverley. It's just a question of following up on some of these items. So, thank you. I hope that's helpful.
Thank you very much indeed, Councillor. Are you suggesting that under the recommendation we add another recommendation about reviewing it in a year's time? Thank you. Do you have a seconder? Thank you very much, Mr. Goodridge. Mr. Monroe.
Thank you, Chairman. As you probably know, I'm the chairman of the Surrey-wide Civilian Military Partnership Board, and of course have worked with Richard and others. I do think Waverley can hold its head up high, actually, if you compare it with other councils. There's no bad council, but Waverley is absolutely in the first wave of giving appropriate support to military and ex-military people. And that's great. I absolutely agree with what Richard says. I think I agree with everything he says, actually. Number 3, encouraging reservists, is from the military's point of view really, really top priority, because they need all the help they can get, and if the council can think of any additional way to help people join the reservists, that would be really welcome. Action number 2, join the guaranteed interview scheme. It's carefully worded here, so it says investigate, which is fine. I have to say there are conflicting views generally about this, and the partnership board itself has not come down in favour of supporting a guaranteed interview scheme. I think that's, and as it happens, neither do I personally. I think really for 2 reasons. One, is it basically fair? If jobs are in short supply, you know, if a ex-military person is suitable for the job, then they will get, in any good interview scheme, and we do run good interview schemes. This is not necessary. And secondly, it sort of says subliminally, well, military people are not really up to it. They need all the help they can get, and that is so not the case. It is unbelievable. Yet the headlines are made by people in combat stress and so on who do wonderful work on an individual basis, but the message is sometimes be wary of hiring a military person because they've got problems. And of course that is emphatically not the case, and the military will tell you that 99.9% of military people, that's all three services of course, slip into civilian life with no problems whatsoever, indeed with far fewer problems than their equivalents elsewhere. So I think we ought to be quite wary of too, but I agree with the wording here, and thank you for this report. It's very gratifying to see.
Thank you. Mr. Gates.
Sorry to come back. I did mean to ask the question, because I'd have a question. Actually, do we know how many reservists currently work for Waverley? And if we do, what's the number? And if we don't, why not?
Madam Chairman, if I may, we're not aware of any reservists at this moment. We have had reservists in the past. I've known we've had environmental health and safety officers and that sort of thing. Not at the moment.
Taking Mr. Gates' point about allowing people, encouraging the workforce to actually join the reservist scheme, is there any way that when we do our terms and conditions we can highlight the fact that we would welcome this? The answer is probably no, but it's just to make staff aware that we encourage this sort of activity.
I think it's certainly something we can take away and explore.
Can you have a look at it
Possibilities,
and
yes.
see? It's the encouragement we need.
Okay, definitely.
Anybody else? Yes.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. With regard to Councillor Munro's comments on the guaranteed interview scheme, is he suggesting that we don't investigate this option, or is he saying that we should carry on and see what comes out?
I'm suggesting that we do what it says on the paper. We do investigate it, but we investigate it with an open mind.
Fine, thank you very much. And can I ask, with regard to the CTP event, when is it held? And maybe we should have a couple of councillors who've been ex-service personnel, like myself, to go along and just be there to talk to ex-service personnel or service personnel that are just leaving the armed forces. And I certainly would like to volunteer for that.
Thank you. Thank you. My own company, which is only a small company, but we do have a policy to employ military personnel, and we've had some very good employees as a result of it. So I personally would encourage all companies to look at this as an option. Thank you. Anybody else? Oh, I'm so sorry, Tony.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Just two comments. I'm very keen that we do support this. I think it's terrific. The Mayor is in a particularly good position to invite people from the Princess of Wales's Royal Regiment to attend events, and I think we should make sure that we do give them plenty of warning, and then they will turn up. I mean, the obvious one is Remembrance Day. If the Mayor is not anywhere in Waverley, Farnham will find a couple of chaps, and they really are, they're fantastic. And there are, I think, other occasions when we could bring them in and just get to know them. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed. Mr. Byam?
Thank you, Madam Chairman. An aside question, we've got the Armed Forces Day national event in June in Guildford. I think it's going to be quite a big event. Is there any relationship at all with what we're talking about and what will happen there, and how Waverley members or etc. and officers may participate in that event?
Anybody else? Louise, can you come back and answer those questions?
Yes, thank you, Madam Chairman. The event in June, I know Guildford are masterminding it for the whole country, I think, aren't they? They've got a very leading role. As yet, we haven't formulated any ideas, but we will definitely come back, given the interest that has been displayed here tonight. You know, we'll look into that.
I think we need to formulate those ideas quite quickly, because we've got an election in the middle of it, and suddenly we'll wake up to the fact we've done nothing. So if you could take it on board Louise, and the other comments that have been made. Are we all happy with that, or does anybody else want to say anything? But thank you for a very good report. That's excellent. And I put the recommendation at item 7 on the agenda. Is that agreed? As amended. Yep. Is that agreed? Good. Thank you. Forward programme, page 49.
Madam Chairman. Councillor Gates was just asking about the amended recommendation.
I'm sorry, Councillor Gates.
Said we would amend it so that we had a review in a year's time.
Yes, Fiona has made a note of it. Okay, so we have got it. Page 49. Forward programme. Are you happy with this? Because we did sort of change it a bit last time. Mr. Gates?
I hope under carbon management this will include some consideration of PV panels on council houses. That's my last shot in that campaign too.
Mr. Gates, when I had an agenda run through just before this meeting, I did say to my colleagues, the officers, now that Mr. Gates is going, if you think this is going to go into the long grass, you are wrong. So I feel sure we will still keep up your efforts on these PV panels. Anybody else, or are you happy with the forward programme? Yes, Mr. Edwards.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Looking to item 4, property asset management strategy, that will be coming to corporate before it is approved, before it goes to the executive, is that correct?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Yes. Thank you. Anybody else? Mr. Byrne?
Following on from Richard Gates' comment about PV panels, of which I'm also a big advocate, I've asked the question before and I don't think I've ever had an answer with regard to new build. We talk about PV panels of putting on the roof of existing dwellings and providing an element of free energy, etc., etc. But I haven't heard anybody talking about the possibility or probability of us considering them on new build social housing, because you can get, and I've seen them around in places, panels that actually sit on the roof as a tile and are linked together. And they may be horribly expensive, and I don't know the answer to that question, but I think they ought to be considered for any of our new properties so that any suitable roofscape in terms of its orientation is considered for that. I've seen them on houses locally.
I do have to stop you there because that item is not on the agenda. All we've got is the forward programme. So if you want that item put on the agenda to consider tiles as opposed to anything else, I think you need to talk to Fiona about the possibility of a report.
Chairman, if I could help, and just to confirm that the consideration of PV panels is something that we do with all new builds as part of delivering, I think it's code level 4, in terms of meeting all the environmental standards. It doesn't mean that PV panels are appropriate in every case, but it is something we look at, and where it will add value, we will include it.
Thank you. Anybody else? Mr. Edwards.
Thank you, Chairman. Just going to the housing strategy and delivery item, and looking at the decision, and it just says potential and the anticipated early the date, etc. Potentially every executive meeting. I'm not sure what that means actually. I mean, do they get progress reports at every meeting? And when do we get to see the progress reports? And I mean, that's the only one with no real data. It goes on into infinity by the look of things, and you know. And
I think it probably does, because we don't build the houses in one go. They're sort of all the time.
Right.
So whenever we need an update, they bring it to executive. I think.
And Chairman, you're absolutely right. We have a commitment as a council to look for opportunities to develop new council housing, and as those opportunities present themselves, a report will come to executive seeking usually permission either to do some investigation work or to go ahead and prepare to place a planning application. And we don't know, because we're looking at opportunities all the time. We don't have a list of things that necessarily we know about in advance. The opportunity arises, it may be a plot of land that has just gone onto the market that we're interested in exploring. And what this flags up is that we're constantly looking, and as soon as an opportunity comes up, we will bring it to the executive.
All right. Thank you very much indeed. If nobody else has any questions, I put the recommendation at item 8. Is that agreed? Agreed. Thank you very much indeed. Performance Management Report, Quarter 3, October to December 2014.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. In front of members, as the Chairman has said, is the third quarter performance report ending in December. The housing performance indicators have been considered already by the Housing Improvement Subcommittee, but the indicators are set out here for your consideration, and officers here will be happy to answer any queries you may have.
Right, you've read all the figures, looked at them, interrogated them. Any questions? Then, if there are no questions, I will put the recommendation at the bottom of item 9. Is that agreed? Agreed. Thank you very much indeed. Minutes of the Housing Improvement Subcommittee. Any questions? Mr. Monroe.
Sort of no news is good news, I think. I used to get lots of complaints, actually, not about the sort of traditional landlord responsibilities. No one complained about the roof leaking, although it may have been, but I did get complaints about the general appearance of the estate, neighbours who were less than neighbourly, and so on and so forth. But I haven't had any complaints on that score for quite some time. I'm talking about Shorteeth and Boundstone, which has its fair share and more of council estates. And so be interested to see if any members have had any contrary view, or if that same view, because if that is the view, then that's jolly good news, and congratulations to all concerned. And this council, as far as housing is concerned, I think is ending on a high.
Well, it's in line for an award, Mr. Roberts, is it not?
Chairman, yes, there's a national housing award that comes up every year, and Waverley's been shortlisted for Outstanding Strategic Housing Authority of the Year, which is quite a remarkable turnaround from a little while back. And I think it reflects the huge amount of good work being undertaken by the officers. But I think this committee in particular, and the Housing Subcommittee, have been involved in a lot of detail over those years, and I think we're seeing the benefits of that coming through. And I think particularly around antisocial behaviour and disputes between tenants, a major focus over the last year, much more robust case management, much more escalation in some cases through court action when everything else has failed. And I think we're starting to see the benefits of that coming through also. And also just to give credit to the tenants panel, who again has been very much a core part of that journey.
Mr. Edwards.
Thank you, Chairman. With regard to the tenants panel, there is a note on there about communication and poor attendance at meetings. Has this been taken any further? Have they been in contact with the communications department at Waverley? And is there a strategy to address the problem?
Could I ask Adrian, who's the Vice Chairman of the Tenants Panel?
Hi, we've actually got a meeting tomorrow, the whole panel, to discuss next year's work plan, which actually includes communications and to contact communications at Waverley. So basically that's the answer. We're going to work on our work plan tomorrow. Thank you.
They are, just to add to what's been said, they are working on it. And the subcommittee has given a whole host of ideas to the tenants panel how we might improve things working together in partnership with the council. So we are working on that very hard. And as Adrian says, tomorrow they will be meeting to discuss matters further. And that includes a website for them. Thank you. Anybody else? Then, in which case, I'm going to put the recommendation at the bottom of item 10, notes the minutes, etc. Is that agreed? Thank you. Policy for dealing with unreasonably persistent and unreasonable complaints. Mr. Roberts?
I'm Chairman. I'll pick up this one. This is a new policy for the Council. It's something that relates to latest advice from the local government ombudsman for a policy dealing with a tiny, and I emphasise the point, tiny proportion of our complainants who, when we've done everything that we can do, when they've exhausted the complaints process, where we are unable to do anything else and their activities have a detrimental impact not only on themselves but also in terms of officer time and ultimately cost to the public purse. And it sets out a formal policy for how we deal with those very small number of cases that may occur during the course of a year. I suspect that members round the table will know themselves of, on occasions, individuals who, despite all your best efforts, continue to bring further difficulties and problems, and after a while you've tried absolutely everything and you don't really know what else to do. And I think officers find themselves in similar positions on rare occasions, and this policy sets out very clearly what the Council can do in those circumstances.
Thank you. Ms. Goodrich?
Thank you, Madam Chairman. I agree that a policy is useful and necessary, and I welcome it. On page 2 of the report, which is page 70, on paragraph 3, it says, under the last bullet point, what the complainant can do to have the decision reviewed. Looking at the policy, I couldn't see anywhere where it could be reviewed or appealed against. There doesn't seem to be, once the Executive Director, in consultation with appropriate members of staff, has decided, I can't see, not that I'm wishing to encourage these sort of people to then issue another complaint, but I can't see where, with human rights and natural justice, and it seems to me there ought to be an appeal panel of, say, 2 or 3 councillors who can review the Executive Director's decision to uphold it or otherwise, just so it looks as if the whole of the burden isn't on one person and one person's decision. Particularly if, for example, the complainant is having a go at the Executive Director, where there would be a conflict of interest, and there doesn't seem to be a situation as to what happens if the Executive Director is in the line of fire. The second point I want to make is on page 75, bullet point 10, or paragraph 10, it puts down all these options. How do you enforce them? Limiting the complainant to one method of contact. They say, oh, noted, we can only email you. So he keeps telephoning, keeps writing letters. What are you actually going to do? Now, in court, vexatious litigants, it's easy. You just don't allow them to issue any proceedings, so that solves the problem. But when you're dealing with an unreasonable person, and you say, right, you may only communicate with one named member of staff, okay, if the receptionist is well tuned, you'll just stop them all. That may be more enforceable than some of the others. But I just raise the query, really, how, on a practical basis, can these be enforced?
Thank you. Mr. Roberts.
Chairman, I shall do my best, and Sue Petzold, who looks after our complaints process and the author of the report, has also joined us, and I'm sure she'll want to comment as well. Dealing with the last question first, how can we enforce it? An example is that if we say to a complainant, we will no longer accept correspondence sent to dozens of officers, we obviously can't physically stop them sending in letters, but what we can do is make sure that all those letters are gathered together and given to the one officer that has been identified as that point of contact. And make sure that they're clear that just because they send in 10 letters or 20 letters does not mean we're going to respond to them. So we would take action in that way. We wouldn't be able to stop the source, but we would certainly be clear about how we will deal with it once it reaches us. In terms of the question about appeal, and maybe Sue can comment on this after me, because the complaints process offers an opportunity for a complainant from level 1 to level 2 to have it reviewed by somebody independently, to then get it an opportunity again between level 2 and level 3 to get it reviewed by somebody independently, and then the opportunity for it to be looked at by the Ombudsman independently. In effect, this is the last course of action, which is to say we've exhausted all the appeal mechanisms. We now need to draw things to a conclusion. And I hope this is right. That's why I suspect there's a reason why there is no appeal process to this final stage.
Does that answer your question?
Yes, it does. It does, but I think it's slightly misleading, therefore, in the report. I can't understand what the complainant can do to have the decision reviewed. I can't see the decision by the executive director.
Can be reviewed.
How could you review that? Because that's what's implied, that once you've made that decision, the fourth bullet point, basically what we're saying is once the executive director has in effect said you are a unreasonably persistent complainant and unreasonably, acting unreasonably, that's the end of it, full stop. And what if the executive director is the one that people are complaining about?
Could you have a look at that aspect of it for us, Mr. Petzold? Thank you. Mr. Gordon-Smith.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Yes, I suffered from one of these, well, actually two cases. One of the major problems is the email, and they can whack it in and it's sent to all councillors. Now, I don't know if it's possible for once a person has been declared to be vexatious, that you have a mechanism to stop this going out. Surely we could do that, because other councillors rang up and said, is this a serious thing and all that, and I said, it's now referred on. I must say the support I got from the officers was excellent on this, and they had to deal with it in the end. But I still find the ease with which you can email and send streams of paper through. Perhaps you could do something with the IT department on this.
Point is taken, Mr. Gordon-Smith. Mr. Munro?
It's easy to send emails. It's also easy to flag them up as junk. So I suggest you do that.
I don't want to get into specific cases.
I wonder, Chairman, I very much agree that there should not be a member appeals process, because that would, well, for all sorts of reasons. But one thing that could happen, we get regular reports on complaints, anonymised, rightly so, and that could just be another section to say X people have been put on the register, and if X got unreasonably large, then members would have the chance of exploring further, just as we do to any other complaints process.
Thank you. Mr. Gates?
Thank you, Chairman. I think sensible things have been said. May I just ask, the examples of unreasonable actions and behaviours, I'm always against becoming hostages to fortune. I happen to be reading a book about a gentleman called Stalin, and I'm pretty sure that with this list he could exclude almost any complaint ever from getting the proper... In other words, the more examples you have, the more people are going to seek something that isn't in that list. My question was, did these come from the Ombudsman, or have we made them up, as it were? Secondly, if I may, I mean, I'm sure Sue will respond to that. Secondly, I am considerably relieved that the person who takes this decision is the executive director. And I think that is as it should be, and so I do strongly support that. So it's really just a question of, do we really need to have 24 different, or however many it is, different reasons, which would just lead to people trying to find another one that doesn't include those reasons. If you just stuck it with definition 3, maybe that would be enough, but that's for debate.
Thank you for your comments. I'm going to take Mrs. Ellis, who's been very patient here, and then ask Mrs. Petzold to respond. Mrs. Ellis.
Thank you, Chairman. Actually, the point has been addressed. I do think it's very easy to set up one's own computer to actually specifically refuse to accept emails from somebody. But I would like to ensure that that is my choice to do that, because whilst I do accept, and I think, like everybody else, I've been on the receiving end of constant emails from people who are perhaps considered to be vexatious. Nevertheless, I like to have that choice as to whether I refuse to accept emails from that person, and whilst I probably would choose not to respond to the person, nevertheless, I find it of interest to read their communications. Thank you
very much, Mrs. Ellis. Mrs. Petzold?
Yes, the examples of behaviour in paragraph 4 are actually very much based on the Ombudsman's guidance, and they are just examples. It's not a definitive list. I mean, there's other things, and they're really meant to be helpful, but if you would prefer not to give examples, then I think that's perfectly acceptable. It would make the policy statement quite a bit shorter. It's just really to give some indication of types of behaviour that could lead. We're not saying it will lead to somebody being regarded as unreasonably persistent, but it's just examples really. And it was thought it would be helpful, but I can easily see that if you took that out, you'd still have the basic framework there. So.
Thank you. Anybody else? Miss Rebels, you looked as if you were pen-poised. Then, in which case, thank you all very much indeed. I put the recommendation at the bottom of item 11 that the committee considers the policy which we've done and our observations will be passed to the executive. Is that agreed? Thank you very much indeed. Item 12, Treasury Management Activity year to date. Mr. Vickers.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. This is the third Treasury Management for this financial year. So it's up to early February that we're reporting. Just an overview, really, of the position where we're at prior to the outturn, which will be in about a month's time. What we look for in terms of the Treasury report is we look at the return, we're looking at liquidity, and we're looking at risk. Those are the key questions that we really address in the report. So a little brief comparison to last year. At the moment we've got £62.5 million in investments as of February, which is £11 million more than we had last year. That's a significant amount of money. Most of it's relating to the housing revenue account, so there's no change in terms of theme that's built up over this last year or so since we got into the new housing financing regime. Comparing again to last year, we've got a similar investment profile in terms of how we spread the money out between what we have on call, looking at liquidity, how much money we need to run the business compared to how far forward we can invest money. The further forward we invest, the better rates we get. So we've got a similar investment profile to last year. When you look at the graphs at the back, so it's a fairly reflective and comparative pattern that you can see that we have. And the big thing is the cash is building up in anticipation of the fact that we have got some capital outflows coming up through the housing developments that we have and the capital programme that we've been spending on, such as the Hazelmere Leisure Centre towards the end of this financial year. And the other thing to point out also is that in comparison to last year, where we're actually putting the money in terms of risk, we're actually in a slightly better position in terms of risk because we've got more money invested in what we call A stable. Now, we look at A as our base benchmark in terms of risk against where we'll put money in with counterparties. So overall, it's a good picture in terms of balancing our risk and return on the investments. In terms of the actual return itself, we've performed really well against budget. So we've got just over £500,000 target to achieve, and we are very easily achieving that. We're forecasting we'll overachieve that slightly. In terms of the actual yield, as in the overall percentage return that we've managed to achieve in interest rate, it's the one we've rehearsed quite a bit this year already against the target we've set, which we are revising for next year, because trying to outperform the market at 0.25% is just not realistic in today's world. But overall, the yield itself has incrementally over the last few months gone up, because the LIBOR rate is slightly higher than the average 3-month yield that we can get on other investments. So it's a good position to be in. I'm open to questions on this.
Thank you very much indeed, Mr. Vickers. Mr. Edwards.
Thank you, Chairman. I just want a clarification on the graphs. On the back page, you've got the investment credit ratings and the amount of money we've got invested. You also got money invested on page next to last page, which is the maturity profile. And if you go back to the external investments outstanding by week, it appears that we have about 63 million there. Okay, according to these figures I've got in front of me here. At week 47 probably. Am I right in thinking that? Yeah?
Yeah, that's fair.
So, looking at the total figures on those investment graphs, on page 84 and 83, they come to about 55 million. So there's 8 million outstanding there. Is that in cash or something? I mean, I just need clarification on that, that's all.
It's entirely a cut-off difference between when the graph was drawn compared to when the actual pie chart was put together. It's entirely all it is. Both graphs are live graphs as they put the numbers in, and I went back and asked for an update for the pie chart itself. So there was a slight timing difference between the two.
The reason I asked the question is because we're not at that 55 million figure until we were at that figure in week 30, probably 32, 33. And since that time, which is now, I don't know, 13 or 14 weeks later, we're at 63 million or whatever. I just wanted to clarify exactly when those graphs were made up.
Mr. Vickers?
I can't tell you categorically today exactly what dates, but I can certainly go back to the workings and give the answer if you wish.
If you could let Mr. Edwards know. And would the rest of the committee be interested? It's only Mr. Edwards, if you'd be very kind. Mr. Gordon-Smith.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. I don't like targets on this sort of area. I'm delighted that Waverley Borough does so well with its investments, but we're not a stockbroker, and they do their very best. I think interest rates are going to go down even next year. So we must make the best of it, I agree. But I think they are to be congratulated on doing far better than the average punter in this area. And thank you.
Thank you very much. Anybody else wish to ask a question? Then in which case I'll put the recommendation, which is under item 12. Is that agreed? Agreed. Thank you very much indeed. We have nothing under item 13 or any issues to be considered and exempt, so I declare the meeting closed. Before you leave, this is the last meeting of the council term for the corporate committee, and I would like to thank all members for the hard work during the last year and for the excellent report to do with responsive repairs. But I would also like to thank the officers for putting up with us for 4 years and actually doing a great job for us. So thank you, officers, very much indeed. We will be losing Mr. Gates, I believe. He's not standing again. We will miss your wise words, Mr. Gates. And we promise to look after PV panels for you. And we have an excellent complaints procedure that you can follow. Oh, I can see that.
Oh, no.
Oh, God, I can see that. But can I wish, if you are standing again, can I wish you all well in the forthcoming elections? So thank you all very much indeed.